Tomorrow as well. We are going to go to Washington now for more on how the White House and Congress are responding to these mass shootings. The big question, will anything really change this time? I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce. And Cecilia, let's begin with President Trump. Here's what he said yesterday about the hate fueling the violence.
In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated.
So what more do we know about whether this is really going to be a sustained campaign from President Trump?
That's the big question this morning, George, is will those words that we heard from the president yesterday match his words and his tweets going forward? The pattern in the past is that they haven't really, this healer-in-chief tone hasn't really lasted. Right before yesterday he spoke, he tweeted, for example, that he wanted to potentially tie immigration reform to gun control. That got a ton of pushback. Even, we're told, from some inside his own White House.
They were surprised by it.
They were surprised by that one. They knew it wasn't going to fly. Look, given especially the El Paso shooter's alleged motives that he wanted to kill as many Mexicans as possible, people were saying that that's just not going to fly. So ultimately it wasn't in there. One of the more surprising responses that we saw yesterday was from former President Barack Obama. You know this, he doesn't normally weigh in on stuff like this. We've got his quote there. He says, "We should soundly reject language coming out of the mouths of any of our leaders that feeds a climate of fear and hatred and normalizes racist sentiments." He never mentioned President Trump by name. He didn't have to. The president is responding to that this morning, saying George Bush never condemned President Obama after Sandy Hook.
Yeah, he's back on Twitter this morning. Meanwhile, as you said, the president did not say anything more about background checks yesterday. Do we know if they're planning any movement on gun control, either by executive action or pushing legislation?
We know in very general terms that there is going to be some kind of push for gun control related executive action and order, something along that lines, but specifics we don't have. One of the things that the president did talk about yesterday was mental illness. It was one of the quotes that really jumped out at a lot of people. He said mental illness pulls the trigger, not the gun. Strong pushback on that, even from the American Psychiatric Association.
Okay, let's bring in Mary Bruce for more on this. And Mary, Mitch McConnell has been blocking, along with his allies in the gun lobby, any movement on this background check bill, which passed the House, extended the waiting period, closed the gun show loophole. But is he feeling any more pressure this morning?
Well, Democrats are certainly trying to up the pressure on him. They are demanding that Mitch McConnell call lawmakers back to Washington to act on this legislation that would require universal background checks. George, these are measures that we know the overwhelming majority of Americans support. But as you mentioned, these bills have been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk since February. Democrats now labeling him the Grim Reaper of legislation. And instead of saying that he's going to bring Congress back to act on these bills, McConnell instead in a statement is encouraging Republicans to, quote, reflect on the subjects the president raised and engage in bipartisan discussions of potential solutions. But George, he is now facing some growing calls from within the Republican Party to do something to boost background checks.
And Mary, we're also seeing more evidence that this domestic terror has become as great or even a greater threat than Islamic terror. Any push in Congress for new tools to take it on?
Well, Congress is looking to the FBI for guidance here, but they could pass a statute that would empower the White House to label some white supremacist groups as domestic terrorists. But, George, officials also say that there is some concern that that would raise significant issues with the First Amendment. George.
Mary Bruce, Cecilia Vega, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.